Time to mosey on east to cowboy country, Highway 97 and the town of Clinton. Well, make that the village of Clinton. Blink and you'll miss it. But there are some interesting collectible shops, a little museum, and you can pick up an ice cream or the best coffee in the Cariboo.
Hello, my name's David Park. You have stopped in the Clinton Coffee House, the best coffee in the Cariboo, bar none. We have coffees, of course, all sorts, espressos, muffins, freshly baked cookies, and we have Wi-Fi for those who need to check your emails and your websites when you're on the way through. Historic Clinton, you can't miss it. We've got a beautiful site. Just look out the windows. You can have all these great views from out there, and I can't wait to see you when you come in.
Then there's the old and historic Palace Hotel, a reminder of times past, these days serving as an art gallery.
My name's Doug Carnegie. I used to be in the film industry in Vancouver, set decoration, did a lot of westerns and period shows. I got interested in the Palace Hotel because it was in disrepair and looked like a nice restoration project.
Well, the palace was a palace indeed compared to the accommodations available to many on their way up to the goldfields. Everything went via stagecoach in those days, freight and people, and they stopped at roadhouses overnight. "100 Mile House," 70 Mile, these all referred to the roadhouses built along the way. Today, Hat Creek Ranch is the last surviving roadhouse, and it's an historic site well worth visiting.
In the early days, all the freight was brought into British Columbia from the lower mainland because there was no farming and ranching established yet. And the freight would be brought up the Cariboo Wagon Road, and usually the freight would stop over in Ashcroft and then would be brought from Ashcroft to here. Now, a wagon this size would carry about a ton of equipment and supplies, and they would actually string 3 of these wagons together, pulled usually by about 10 teams of mules or oxen, and it would take them at least a full day to get just to the top of the hill from Ashcroft, and then the next day they would make it out here. So it would take them actually 2 days to go about 14 miles.
Get a tour of the ranch. It's the real deal, with animators acting in character.
We've named them all. This one is Calypso, that one's Petunia, that one's Cleopatra, that one's Mrs. Norris.
Yeah, here at Hat Creek Ranch we get an awful lot of European visitors, mostly German people, and a lot of Dutch and French people also. We do get a lot of Australian people and also from New Zealand.
This is the blacksmith shop here in Hat Creek, with the ranch being kind of, it was a major stop in the stagecoach route, and that's the old Cariboo highway right outside the door. So there would have been stagecoaches and freight wagons going by here all day long. So the blacksmith that was in here, his main job would have been shoeing horses and repairing freight wagons and things like that. But when he wasn't doing that, the smith also had to supply all the locals with anything they needed that was made of metal. Right from your farming implements, mining tools, carpentry tools. Even a lot of your kitchen utensils, knives and forks and spoons, were all built by the blacksmith. One of the things that the blacksmith built a lot of, and we take a lot of them for granted nowadays, but if anyone was building anything made out of wood, you'd need to buy a pile of nails. Of course, there was no hardware stores nearby at the time. You couldn't just go buy them like we do now. You had to decide how much you needed, how many pounds you wanted, how many long of a nail you needed. Then you go to the blacksmith shop and order them from them. So I'll show you how the old blacksmith used to build a nail.
It was the gold rush that lured settlers here. The promise of instant riches has always worked to seduce many. There had never been any Europeans here before. Let's change cultures. For up to 10,000 years there had been people living on this land, native people living in harmony with the environment.
The kukuli or ishkin was usually built partially underground and on the side of a hill near a river so that to provide for camouflage and blockage from the wind. The top entrance was commonly used as a way for the men to come down and younger men to show their strength and their courage. The winters here get somewhat pretty cold as we're further north in the continent, but it's generally warmer here than it would be on the coast, for instance. And yeah, usually it's pretty decent in there.
We're off to look at the farm and gather some eggs for breakfast. There's a quick peek inside the roadhouse to see how people ate and slept. Inside is where things start to get real interesting.
This story involves in the 1980s when there was a work crew working here, and a good many of the work crew had brought their trailers and campers with them and were camping out in the orchard. And one day one of the fellas was working here in the kitchen, and he had to go underneath the kitchen floor regarding something to do with the floor joists. So he went through this trap door, pulled this trap door off, went down in there, and there's access underneath there to the floor joists under there. And there's about a 3-foot crawl space in there. He was working under there and noticed it was time for lunch. So he came back up and crawled over to the crawl space here, to the trap door, and went to stand up to crawl out of there, and as he stood up, something pushed him back down on top of his shoulders. So he thought that was rather strange, so he took his tool belt off, actually, and put it on the floor beside him, and went to stand up. Something pushed him back down again. No sound, just a pressure on his shoulders, pushing him down into the hole. Third time, he tried to stand up, and he stood up fine. So he went and had his lunch, told his friends the story, and got, of course, ridiculed for the story. Came back after lunch, his tool belt was gone. He looked all around for his tool belt, crawled underneath the house looking for his tool belt, couldn't find his tool belt anywhere. For 3 days he couldn't find his tool belt. He came back into work one morning and his tool belt was hanging off the corner of this door. What happened with this story is, with the same work crew that was here in the 1980s, they were here for quite a while, and there was a crew working, and as I said, many of them had brought their campers, and a few of the fellows had brought their families with them also, and they were all camped out here in our orchard. Well, one of the fellas had brought his wife and his daughter with him. His daughter was about 8 or 9 years old, and they had been here for a few days, and his daughter looked over at the house and said, and they were having lunch at that picnic table over there in the orchard. And as they were having lunch, his daughter said to her father, "Daddy, can I go in the house and play with the little girl?" And the father said, "Well, there's no little girl in the house. There was just the workmen working in the house." And she said, "No, Daddy, the little girl in the house wants me to come inside and play with her." And the father said, "No, there is no little girl in there." And the little girl said, "Yes, there is. She's standing at the back door." And she pointed to this doorway, and in this doorway was the image of a little girl in a white dress. And the father looked over here and saw that, stood up from the picnic table, and as he stood up, a bolt of energy flew from this doorway across the orchard, hit him at the table, and bowled him onto his back, and then everything was gone. The little girl image was gone, and the bolt of energy was gone also.